chosen one, the silence is over. The government's mask just cracked, and what's leaking out will shake the foundations of everything they've built against you. For years, they rewrote your story in the shadows, twisting truths, planting lies, and dressing deception in the clothing of authority. They thought the evidence would stay buried forever. They thought you would stay silent. But today, the tables turn. The truth isn't knocking politely, it's breaking the door off its hinges, carrying proof in one hand and justice in the other. Those who once smirked while stabbing you in the back are now pale, cornered, and exposed under a light they cannot escape. And the best part, you didn't even have to lift a finger. Heaven, history, and the hidden voices have risen to fight for you. Comment 777 if you can feel it. The shift, the reckoning, the unveiling, and from my heart, thank you to every soul who has stood with this channel. Whether through your words, your prayers, or your super thanks, you are part of something far bigger than you realize. Stay close, because what I'm about to reveal next will make you question everything they told you was true. God's chosen ones, government exposed. They hid the truth about you. Now, chosen one, let's tear the curtain down. You were never the villain. You were the target. They engineered this from the shadows, twisting your words, setting subtle traps, weaving poisonous group chats in the dead of night. They staged scenes, framed moments, and painted you as the storm while they hid behind the mask of the victim. It was theater scripted, rehearsed, and designed to assassinate your name. They bet the crowd would cheer for them, because crowds rarely question loud voices. But here's where their story fell apart. They forgot one thing: truth doesn't sleep. When the high-level whistleblower stepped forward, the ground shifted. This wasn't an outsider peeking in, this was an insider, carrying years of guilt like a ticking time bomb. And when they broke, they didn't whisper. They detonated the whole fortress: names, dates, screenshots, audio. The lies didn't just collapse. They were burned to ash. Now, those who celebrated your fall can't even lift their heads. Their attacks weren't clumsy misunderstandings. They were calculated strikes. And now, the very hands that shoved you down are the ones trembling, praying. Nobody looks too closely. There's something deeply poetic about justice that arrives without noise. You didn't beg. You didn't scream. You let the heavens handle it, and they did. Because that's the essence of the chosen one. You don't chase truth. Truth finds you. You stayed whole when no one believed you. You walked through rooms heavy with suspicion, replaying conversations in your mind, wondering if one sentence could have changed it all. And yet, here you are, watching the tables turn while they scatter from the very places they once controlled. Why did they come for you? Because your very existence revealed their counterfeit. Your calm revealed their chaos. Your honesty stripped the disguise from their manipulation. And when they couldn't touch your character, they went after your reputation. But here's the secret. Reputation is what strangers think. Character is what heaven sees. And heaven always rewrites the script. Lies are fast. But truth runs marathons. And now, as the whistleblower's voice roars through the silence, their empire of fiction is collapsing in broad daylight. The curses they hurled at your name are returning like a boomerang, striking them with twice the force. Remember this. Chosen one, what's hidden will always come to light when your heart stays pure. When no one claps for you, heaven claps instead, and the sound is unmistakable. Walk tall. Let them speak. Their words are already crumbling. What was once their private joke is now their public shame, and all you had to do was outlast them. This is your redemption arc, and it's only the beginning. They did not just tell lies about you. Chosen one. They built an entire architecture of deception, brick by brick, like masons constructing a fortress to hide their corruption. Every meeting behind closed doors was a council of darkness, trading your name like currency, passing falsehoods like poker chips across a smoky table. They wrote your downfall as if it were a scripted tragedy, forgetting one crucial truth. You were never their actor. You were the evidence, the living contradiction to their narrative. They thought they could choreograph your life like a stage play, assigning you the role of the villain so convincingly that even the crowd applauded the performance. They planted rumors as carefully as a general buries landmines, waiting for the first misstep. When you didn't stumble, they became more desperate. Your silence became proof of guilt. Your absence became admission. Your unshakable confidence became arrogance. They needed the crowd to believe you were a threat, because in reality, you were the proof of what righteousness looks like when it stands unbending. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be brought to light. Luke 8:17. Truth has a strange way of acting like acid. It corrodes, lies until the whole structure collapses. And somewhere deep inside their ranks, a conscience began to crack. Someone they trusted, someone who knew every detail of the deception, could no longer bear the weight. How long can a guilty conscience live in silence before it bursts? Every time they laughed about how they framed you, the ticking grew louder. Every time they saw you walk past with your head still high, it thundered in their soul. Until one day, the clock struck midnight, the whistleblower broke, and when they spoke, they didn't whisper, they detonated. It was like Nathan confronting David in 2 Samuel 12:7, declaring, "You are the man," exposing the sin no one thought would ever be named. What happens when the very person they trusted most turns against them? The fallout was immediate. Those who once clapped for the false story now looked around in confusion. The script had been shredded in front of them. Why would they go to such lengths to destroy an innocent life? The answer is the same reason the Pharisees plotted against Jesus. Light has come into the world, but people loved darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. John 3:19. Your life illuminated their shadows. Your integrity embarrassed their manipulation. They feared that if you kept rising, questions would be asked, not about you, but about them. And so, they acted first, flipping the story before the story could flip them. In modern times, this pattern repeats. The renowned painter Caravaggio, whose mastery of light and darkness still mesmerizes the world, once said through his art that darkness is only understood when light reveals it. In your story, you are that light. But where there is light, there will always be those who fear exposure. And just as history records villains, so too does it record their ruin. One such man, long forgotten by the masses, was Philippe Égalité, a French revolutionary who betrayed his allies for personal gain. At first, he thrived in the chaos he helped create. But when the tide turned, he was devoured by the very machine he had built. His end was not glorious. It was a grim reminder that treachery eventually consumes the traitor. If truth can corrode their lies like acid, How much longer can their empire stand? So now, here you stand, still unbroken, still rising. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Isaiah 54:17. They thought your story would end with disgrace. But your endurance has rewritten the narrative, and this moment is your summons. No longer is your name whispered in slander. It is declared in truth. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1-5. Chosen one. Rise. The lies have collapsed under the weight of truth. Step into the role heaven wrote for you before time began. Because the stage is no longer theirs, it is yours. Stand. Speak. And reclaim the crown they tried to bury. Receipts always survive. The universe keeps its own records, as if the heavens themselves archive every word, every intention, every secret exchange. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. Ecclesiastes 12:14. And now, those very documents, those deleted messages, those altered timelines have returned like ghosts dragging chains across the floor of their conscience, unedited, unfiltered, and merciless. They didn't just tell lies. Chosen one. They constructed your downfall with the precision of engineers plotting a bridge meant to collapse under your feet. Backroom conversations became their blueprints. Anonymous reports were the scaffolding. Missing files. The bricks. They pushed a narrative designed to make you break under pressure, hoping the weight would crush you into silence. What happens when the storm they created fails to sink the ship? When you didn't break, they panicked. They pushed harder, thinking more pressure would splinter you. But instead, you absorbed it like deep roots drink from the floodwaters. You didn't yell. You observed. You didn't fight dirty. You let the dirt rise on its own. Knowing the Lord will fight for you, you need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. And when it did, the stench filled the entire room, not with your shame, but theirs. Nature itself mirrors this truth, just as a forest fire, meant to destroy, can also trigger the germination of seeds long buried beneath the soil. Their attacks only awakened the resilience they underestimated. Their stories, once woven tight like a spider's web in the dark, began to unravel strand by strand until the whole net collapsed. Why did it take a whistleblower for the truth to break through? Because the universe loves irony. The person they counted on most cracked under the weight of your injustice. The one they thought was loyal became the floodgate heaven used to release truth into the open. No one can hide so that I cannot see them, declares the Lord. Do I not fill heaven and earth? Jeremiah 23:24. That is divine justice. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through the least expected voice. Their allies scatter like starlings when the hawk's shadow passes overhead. Their supporters turn silent, their confidence evaporating like morning mist. The lies they built collapsed like a dam breached by spring meltwater, because nothing holds when it's constructed on deception. How long can a fortress of lies stand when truth begins to knock on the gates? This moment reminded me of a line from the play The Winter's Tale by William Shakespeare. Though the truth may be silent, it will not be denied. They thought their curtain could hide the stage forever, but when the whistleblower pulled it down, the props, the scripts, the fake tears, all of it lay bare under the glare of the light. And you, chosen one, you never had to defend yourself. They made you believe silence was a weakness, that you had to explain your every move. But your silence was not emptiness. It was the waiting of the lion in the grass. Knowing the moment would come, when the prey exposes itself. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. If truth is a wildfire, can smoke ever hold it back? They crafted this deception with precision. This was not sloppy malice. It was a coordinated act of character assassination. But they forgot one immutable law of heaven. When you attack someone walking in truth, the universe takes it personally. Touch not my anointed ones. Do my prophets no harm. 1 Chronicles 16:22. You were not a random target. You were chosen. And that title doesn't promise immunity. It promises divine protection. Now the lies are ashes, and the wildfire is still burning. Chosen one, rise. The courtroom of heaven has already ruled in your favor. Step forward, not as the accused, but as the vindicated. The stage is yours now. They planned your public shaming like an elaborate festival, every piece choreographed, every actor rehearsed, every prop in place. They didn't anticipate that when the curtain lifted, the spotlight would blind them. Instead, this time, their downfall was captured in 4 Kelvin clarity. The screenshots, the voice notes, the testimonies, the receipts cold. Precise evidence. Each piece like a laser cutting through their fabrications. Their deception was a machine with too many moving parts. In physics, any structure with excess moving components is more prone to mechanical failure. The more gears, the more friction, the more inevitable the breakdown. For whatever is hidden is meant to be disclosed, and whatever is concealed is meant to be brought out into the open. Mark 4:22. Truth is not complex, it is steady, unmoving, like a foundation stone in the heavenly architecture of justice. How do they fight a truth so unshakable it resonates like a cathedral bell? Now they are silent, not from repentance, but from fear. Fear that the people they once deceived are now rereading every conversation like forensic investigators. Fear of judgment. Fear that this time, they cannot twist the narrative into a new shape. Their calculations failed because truth operates outside human algorithms. You cannot outsmart universal timing in acoustics. There's something called resonant frequency, the exact tone at which a structure begins to vibrate until it collapses. The whistleblower was that frequency. Their confession shook the entire framework of lies until the walls cracked. The truth will set you free, John 8:32, but it will first bring down the prisons built from falsehoods. What happens when the smallest crack in their wall becomes the fault line that swallows the whole fortress? And here's the part they'll never admit. You didn't have to fight dirty. You didn't need to scream, beg, or present your own evidence. You stood still, like a seasoned champion in the quiet before the final round, conserving energy while your opponent spent theirs in vain. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. When the dust cleared, the battlefield told the story, without you uttering a word. The renowned conductor Arturo Toscanini once said that the pauses in music are just as important as the notes themselves. In your battle, your silence was that pause, the space where their noise collapsed into emptiness. And your victory became the only sound left in the hall. Why should you ever apologize for the storm you become when they lie on your name? Let their betrayal be the fuel that ignites your ascent. In architecture, every great cathedral begins with a blueprint and a cornerstone. Their lies accidentally became the blueprint for your rebirth, and truth itself laid the cornerstone. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Isaiah 54:17. Let their schemes be the red carpet for your return. Now, they have no voice, because the evidence speaks with a thunder they cannot match. The whistleblower's words echo like a final verdict. The silence of their crowd is not peace, it is shame. If this is only the beginning, what will the full restoration look like? And you, once their target, are now the proof that heaven does not forget. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1-5. Chosen one. Rise. Walk forward, not as a survivor, but as the living correction to their corruption. The first chapter of your vindication has been written. Now, finish the book. The web of lies they wove is collapsing, and now they are caught in it, like flies thrashing against their own trap. The thing about lies is that they come stamped with an expiration date, sometimes invisible to the naked eye, but visible to the one who sees all. For there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. Luke 12-2. Truth arrives like a final notice stamped in red, and when it comes, it doesn't knock, it walks straight in. What happens when the architect of the web becomes its first prisoner? They thought they were untouchable. Their deception was spun so tightly, so intricately. They believed no one could unravel it. But the threads they thought were strong were already fraying. Old emails they forgot existed. Bank transfers they thought buried. Group chats they never deleted, all resurfacing like bones unearthed after a long drought. And every piece of evidence is speaking louder than any excuse they could attempt. Imagine this: you're standing in the same room where they once whispered lies about you, where every corner seemed to hum with their conspiracies. Now, those same walls echo with silence. Their phones buzz with notifications, messages being reread, screenshots passed from one hand to another. Each buzz is a new crack in the armor they swore could not be pierced. How does it feel for them to realize the same rope they tied for you is now tightening around their own necks? They are not running toward damage control. They are frozen statues caught mid-lie, while the crowd that once applauded them now looks on with suspicion. The trail of evidence they left behind has become an unbreakable chain, wrapping tighter and tighter around their reputations. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. Proverbs 26-27. They laughed at your silence once, didn't they? Mocked the way you refused to retaliate. They celebrated each time another person turned away from you. They wore your pain like a medal, as if it proved their dominance. But here is the truth they never prepared for. Lies are heavy. The human mind can carry only so much before the weight buckles the frame. To illustrate, the late Maya Angelou, celebrated poet and voice of resilience, once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. They showed the world their character long ago, but the world was slow to see. Now, no one can unsee it. When the collapse begins, can anyone choose the speed of their own fall?" And history has its own cautionary tales. Take John Atherton, a 17th century bishop in Ireland. Publicly, he preached morality. Privately, he lived in deep corruption. For years, his influence shielded him. But when the truth emerged, it didn't just ruin his position, it led to his execution. His legacy was not his sermons, but his exposure. They believed their collapse would happen in the shadows, quietly, where no one could witness it. Instead, it is unfolding before you, before those they deceived, before those they swayed. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1-5. If their downfall is the opening act, what will your vindication look like in the final scene? Chosen one, do not apologize for the storm you have become. Let their betrayal be the fuel that powers your rise. The same crowd that once doubted you will one day testify of your endurance. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Isaiah 54:17. Stand now, for this is not the end, it is the correction, and heaven's correction is always final. Yes, some of them were simply following the crowd. Some never set out to wound you, or at least, that is the lie they rehearse for themselves now. But ignorance never cancels impact. Just because you didn't press the blade doesn't mean you're innocent for standing in the room as it pierced. So then, each of us will give an account of ourselves to God. Romans 14:12. They backed the wrong version of the story, and now the bitter taste of it lingers in their throats like ash after a fire. How long can someone pretend they didn't participate when the truth shows their fingerprints all over the scene? Guilt is a shadow that doesn't vanish when the sun sets. It follows even in the deepest night, changing shape but never leaving. And you saw the shift, didn't you? It wasn't a cinematic climax, no screaming match, no slamming doors, no courtroom chaos. It was worse. It was quiet. It was real, like the forest right before a storm, when every leaf holds still, knowing the wind is about to change everything. One of them glanced at a screen, and their face drained of color. Another cleared their throat over and over, trying to mimic normalcy, but failing. A third grabbed their phone with a trembling hand, making an excuse to step outside. But they weren't hiding from you, chosen one. They were hiding from their own reflection in the mirror of truth. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing. Ecclesiastes 12:14. Now picture this. Every lie they told lined up like evidence in a trial. Their false words, their staged sympathy, their subtle betrayals, all set in black and white. What happens when every mask they've worn is ripped off in the full light of day? The mask of the poor victim crumbles like dry leaves underfoot. The false stories dissolve like frost under the rising sun. They can't even meet your gaze now, because your very existence is the undeniable proof that their narrative was a fabrication. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1-5. You might ask, why didn't they just tell the truth from the start? Because the truth made them small. It revealed the jealousy they nursed in silence. It exposed how deeply your presence unsettled them. For them, it was easier to cast you as the villain than to admit they envied your light. Nature tells the same story. When a tall cedar grows in the forest, smaller trees often bend away. Desperate for light, they cannot steal. But no matter how they twist, the cedar's height still testifies of its strength. If jealousy is a seed, how long before it strangles the soil it grew in? The moment the truth came out, they weren't just embarrassed, they were unmasked. No more hiding behind half smiles and passive-aggressive small talk. The heat of reality melted every disguise. And here's the hardest part. They didn't expect the universe to stand beside you. They thought the loudest voice would be the one believed. In the 1960 film Elmer Gantry, the title character says, "When you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything." They now live in the opposite reality, trying to remember 100 different lies while the truth stands unshaken. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Isaiah 54:17. Chosen one, rise. The verdict is no longer in their hands. It's written in heaven's book. Walk forward. Not just cleared, but crowned. This is not the closing act. It is the prologue to your reign. They thought popularity meant protection, as if numbers could serve as an impenetrable fortress. But the universe does not measure in votes. It measures in balance. In the architecture of heaven, weight must always be distributed evenly. When one side bears the mass of deceit, Collapse is inevitable. The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in people who are trustworthy. Proverbs 12:22. And when you walk with truth, even if you are outnumbered, you are never outmatched. What happens when the illusion of a crowd becomes a hollow echo chamber? Some will try to distance themselves now. You will hear the familiar lines, "I didn't know the full story," or "I wasn't really involved." But silence is involved. In behavioral psychology, omission bias teaches us that choosing not to act when witnessing harm does not absolve responsibility. It amplifies it. Every person who saw you suffer and said nothing carries the same imprint as the one who set the trap. Let them squirm. Let them scramble for words that cannot reverse what they have broken. Picture this. They remain in the same social circles. Yet every glance feels different. Every conversation carries a subtle weight. The gravitational pull of their lie has not only crushed their image, it has cracked the very floor beneath them. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out. Proverbs 10:9. How do you rebuild when the foundation itself is fractured? Now, they cannot show their faces without hearing whispers. They cannot laugh without people scanning for the seams in their expression. Credibility, once held like currency, has become as worthless as counterfeit coins in a marketplace that now trades only in truth. Alliances fade. Respect evaporates. And the social architecture they constructed is collapsing under the weight of evidence. Physics teaches that when a structure exceeds its stress limit, it doesn't simply bend, it breaks suddenly, irreversibly. The truth was, that force, it burned through their reputation like acid on parchment. Some of them will not recover. They didn't just lie about you, they attempted a full-scale rewrite of your identity, but truth came wielding a pen sharper than theirs, striking through every forged word. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Isaiah 54:17. If the floor beneath them is already cracking, how long before the entire building falls? And you're not chasing revenge. You're not orchestrating their suffering. You are walking forward, and that alone is punishment enough, because nothing terrifies a liar more than seeing the person they tried to destroy still standing, still shining, and now surrounded by irrefutable proof that the accusation was a lie. This is what justice looks like. Not fireworks, not public applause, but a cold, deliberate silence where their lies used to be. A silence like the pause before the final round in a championship match where the victor has already been decided. But the final blow has yet to be struck. The celebrated architect Antoni Gaudí once said, "Nothing is art if it does not come from nature." In your vindication, nothing is justice unless it is rooted in truth. And now the entire structure of their deceit lies in ruins at your feet. When the dust settles, will they even recognize the landscape without their false walls? Chosen one, your peace is the payback. Your endurance is the verdict. Your unwavering stance is the sentence. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1-5. Keep walking tall. Let them sit in the ashes of what they tried to burn you with, because when betrayal crumbles, the only structure left standing is truth. And this time, it is entirely on your side, crushed by the truth they once fed on. They now find themselves choking on the very poison they served to others. They didn't just believe the lie. Chosen one, they embraced it. They loved it. It gave them an excuse to look down on you, a platform to parade their self-righteousness while secretly delighting in your pain. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Isaiah 5:20. What does it say about a person when they need someone else's suffering to feel whole? This was never a misunderstanding. It was entertainment for them. Your silence became their punchline. Your pain was the fuel for their group chats. Whispered gossip and smug grins exchanged across rooms. They didn't merely tolerate the lie, they nurtured it, watered it, and built their social connections around it. But now, the truth is staring them down, unblinking, unmovable, and suddenly, laughter has no place in their mouths. Imagine this. Someone spends months constructing a cage for you, carefully measuring every bar, oiling the hinges, ensuring no escape. Then, one day, the door swings open and it's them inside. That's where they are now. For whatever is hidden is meant to be disclosed. Mark 4:22. The truth hasn't just cleared your name, it has shackled theirs. How do you carry the weight of chains you forged for someone else? You saw it the moment the evidence came to light, shoulders hunched, fingers twitching, eyes darting like prey, suddenly aware of the predator's shadow. They thought they were the judges, entitled to sentence you with rumors and silence. But the gavel has been ripped from their hands. The truth doesn't whisper, it thunders. And nothing burns a liar faster than exposure. The late Archbishop Oscar Romero once said, "The truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it loose. It will defend itself." That's exactly what's happening. They are not just wrong, they are dead wrong. Wrong for doubting your character, wrong for standing by as others buried you, and most of all, wrong for wanting you to be the villain. Why did they want that so badly? Because it was never about proof, it was about preference. They felt smaller next to your light. You weren't convenient. You couldn't be controlled. So they dipped their brushes into the paint of shadows, hoping to cover you in darkness. But shadows cannot exist without light. And now, those very shadows are turning on them. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1-5. History holds its own mirror. Benedict Arnold, once a decorated general in the American Revolution, later infamous as a traitor, his name became synonymous with betrayal. Not because his opponents defeated him, but because his own treachery consumed him. That's the fate of those who weaponize deceit. Their legacy is written in the ink of their own corruption. When your very presence becomes their reminder, how do they escape it? You don't need to speak. You don't need to point fingers. Your continued existence, steady, unshaken, is enough to rattle them. Every time they see you still standing, their conscience shakes. They can't unhear the truth. They can't rewrite their silence. And the worst part, they know you remember. That knowledge will sit on their shoulders long after you've walked free of the weight. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Isaiah 54-17. Let them carry that burden. Let them sit in the ashes of what they tried to burn you with. You've already shed yours. Rise higher. Chosen one. The higher you stand, the smaller their lies appear, and the further their shadows fade into nothing. You never needed their tears. And yet, look who's drowning now. They never wept for you when you were bleeding in silence. But now they beg for pity because the blood on their hands won't wash off. You never asked for their guilt-soaked apologies or those trembling stutters masquerading as regret. You didn't wait by the door, hoping they'd one day see the light. Not because deep down, chosen one. You knew those who laughed at your pain were never capable of grieving your wounds. Like a broken tooth or a lame foot is reliance on the unfaithful in a time of trouble. Proverbs 25-19. And yet, here they are, breaking not all at once, but in slow, visible stages. It begins subtly like a hairline crack in glass that spreads with each heartbeat, a twitch in the jaw, a smile that dies before reaching their eyes, hands curling into tense fists beneath the table. The armor they once wore, confidence, pride, arrogance is peeling away in real time. What happens when the mask they forged to shame you melts under the heat of truth? Nature knows this pattern well. Icebergs, magnificent in size, do not collapse in an instant. They groan, splinter, and fracture before sinking into the sea. Their collapse is inevitable, no matter how much of them is hidden beneath the surface. That is what you're watching now, the slow-motion fall of those who swore you were the problem. The same people who watched you drown with dry eyes are now choking on the salt water of their own guilt. But make no mistake, none of it is for you. They are not crying because they regret what they did. They are crying because the truth they buried like a rusted sword has turned in their own hands. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. Ecclesiastes 10:8. Are they truly repentant, or simply terrified of exposure? This is the mirror moment, the crack that shows them who they truly are. Not the victim, not the hero, the betrayer. Imagine this. Someone once sat in the front row of your suffering, popcorn in hand, entertained, smug, convinced you'd never rise again. Now, fast forward, they're the ones under the blinding spotlight. The truth is projected across the walls for all to see. Like a scene in Murder in the Cathedral. The 1935 play by T.S. Eliot, where Archbishop Thomas Becket stands before his accusers, unflinching, knowing the cost of his conviction, except here. The climax is not a martyr's death. It's the public unmasking of those who sought to destroy you, and the audience is no longer applauding them. They are watching their undoing. They are watching their undoing. Should you forgive them simply because they've been caught? Real remorse doesn't arrive only when the crowd turns. It doesn't wear the disguise of excuses or revisionist history. Yet here they are, scrambling to rewrite their roles. I didn't mean it like that. I wasn't really involved. No, they were in the front row, cheering. They were in the group chat, adding fuel. They treated your isolation like a survival game and bet against you. And now they are the ones gasping for air, drowning in the guilt they once mocked you for. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. If they could gamble on your downfall, why should you carry the cost of their collapse? Let them carry it. Let them feel the weight of the smirks, the cold shoulders, the whispered mockery that once made them feel powerful. You have already shed your burden. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Isaiah 54:17. Chosen one. Keep walking. You don't need their tears. You never did. The flood is theirs to survive or to drown in. When a lie collapses on its own architect, it doesn't crumble politely. It detonates. They didn't confess because they discovered a conscience. They confessed because the truth got to the microphone first, leaving them no escape route. For there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. Luke 12:2. The stage they once owned now belongs to truth alone, and it speaks with a voice they can't drown out. They had built their entire self-image like a fortress of glass, appearing solid. But one impact was all it took to shatter, and now the shards are everywhere, cutting them as they fall. There it is, the moment they swore would never come. The silence they once weaponized to suffocate you has now transformed into a trembling voice, cracking under the pressure. I don't know why I did it. I just went along with the crowd, and suddenly, every lie, every staged smirk, every whisper they stacked like bricks against you, comes undone in seconds. They stare at the wreckage of their own making, realizing too late that silence has a memory. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. Proverbs 11:3. This is not the vindication they imagined. It is the mirror they prayed would never be held up. What happens when the script they've rehearsed for years is shredded in front of them? Let's be clear. Chosen one, they are not crying because of the wounds they inflicted on you. They are crying because their illusion of being a good person has been obliterated. They wanted to be the hero of their own narrative, but now the mirror is showing them the villain, and the reflection is merciless. That's the kind of wound no applause can cover. No self-justification can soothe. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Isaiah 5:20. It is one thing to sin in secret, but another to be stripped of your mask in front of the crowd that once cheered you on. Picture it. Someone commits the crime, basks in the applause, and then when the truth strikes like a gavel from heaven, they drop to their knees, not from remorse for the damage they caused, but from grief that they can no longer pretend they are innocent. They clutch their chest as though wounded. Yet the injury is not from justice's sword, it is from the collapse of their own facade. This is what happens when the role they cast themselves in dissolves under the stage lights. The Lord is known by his acts of justice. The wicked are ensnared by the work of their hands. Psalm 9:16. If guilt doesn't need a courtroom, what happens when it arrives without warning? This is a performance fracturing under the gravity of real consequences. In physics, there's a concept called structural resonance. When an outside frequency matches a structure's natural frequency, it amplifies vibrations until the structure fails. The truth is that resonance, once it struck, their facade shook until it splintered, like a bridge designed for calm conditions but undone by the force of an unexpected wind. Their defense was never built to endure sustained truth. The truth will set you free, John 8:32. But first, it will dismantle every cage built on lies. They were never leaders. They were not thinkers. They were satellites orbiting gossip, feeding on clicks, powered by fear. And instead of questioning the lie, they sharpened it into a blade. Instead of speaking truth, they swallowed their voice and played along. Every act of silence was an investment in a future collapse. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Galatians 6-7. The deception gave them cover, a shadowed alcove from which to launch attacks while avoiding accountability. They thought they were clever enough to erase the trail, but human memory may fade. Physical evidence does not. Whispered words evaporate into air, but paper has permanence. The word of the Lord endures forever, 1 Peter 1:25. And so does a written record when the appointed time comes. How do you explain loyalty to a lie when the receipts carry your name? And then the universe, patient, like a master chess player, waiting for the right move, struck, one by one. The files dropped: emails, voice notes, messages with their names etched on every page, time-stamped like tombstones, marking the death of their credibility. Each document was a chisel, carving away the last remnants of their defense. There was no pause, no escape, only the steady march of revelation, for God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing. Ecclesiastes 12:14. It wasn't just your truth rising that day, it was their mask falling. No more deniability, no more spinning narratives, no more hiding behind rehearsed innocence. Everything they did now stares back at them in black ink and cold, unyielding evidence. The more they avert their eyes, the louder the evidence seems to speak, and in that silence, even the air feels heavy as they sit with eyes down, fingers twitching, breath caught in their throat. The irony is complete. Not a single word left to offer. You don't need to speak, because the truth has already thundered. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Isaiah 54:17. This time, it cannot be unsaid. In moments like these, I'm reminded of a statement by the renowned conductor Wilhelm Furtwängler, who led orchestras through both the beauty and chaos of wartime Europe. He said, "Silence can be like the pause before an explosion. It carries the whole weight of what comes next. Right now, that silence belongs to you, chosen one. And when you step forward from it, the sound will be heard far beyond this moment. If their empire of lies has fallen, will you step forward to claim the ground they tried to bury you under? Stand, walk tall, let the wreckage speak for itself, and remember when the truth breaks the lie. The architect is always the first casualty. The puppet master's mask has slipped, and it will never sit on their face the same way again. For years, they played their game like a genius, pulling strings with surgical precision, until those same strings looped back and tightened around their own throat. They strutted through life like kings and queens of chaos, draped in smugness, utterly convinced that their whispers would remain buried and their fingerprints on your downfall would never be traced. For the ways of everyone are before the eyes of the Lord, and he examines all their paths. Proverbs 5:21. What happens when the hunter's trap catches the hunter instead? They believed they were above the truth, untouchable. But the evidence they thought was gone forever has risen from the ashes. And with it, the illusion they clung to shattered into dust. The fallout is instant, violent, irreversible. It wasn't just any file, chosen one. It was the file, the one buried deepest, the one thread they swore no one would ever find. And yet, here it is, damning in its precision, undeniable in its clarity. Before they even touched the paper, their hands trembled. Before a single word was spoken, their smile faltered, because this wasn't just a piece of truth, it was the blade that split the mask clean off their face. You've seen this before in history. The infamous Italian banker Michele Sindona rose to power in the 1972 by secretly manipulating financial empires from the shadows. He was hailed as brilliant until a single document linked him to fraudulent banking collapses. His empire evaporated overnight, and his name became a cautionary tale of ambition rotting into infamy. That's what happens when the mask falls. The fall is not a stumble, it's a plummet. If one document could dismantle an empire, what will the weight of the whole truth do? The louder they were in the crowd, the more desperate they were to hide the whispers in their own ear. You felt it all along, the ones pointing fingers, spreading rumors, turning hearts against you. They were pawns, hollow vessels moved by fear, jealousy, and ignorance. But behind them stood someone else, calculating, cold, yet a mastermind who feared you not for your mistakes, but for your potential. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Ephesians 6:12. They knew if they didn't sabotage you early, your rise would become the mirror that revealed their mediocrity. Imagine this: you're standing in a room full of liars, each wearing a mask of innocence. Then someone drops the receipts, and every thread leads back to a single name, the one no one suspected. the one who smiled in photographs, played the helpful bystander, all while puppeteering every move. That's this moment. The mastermind is unmasked, and everyone knows it. How does a room feel when the most trusted face is suddenly revealed as the enemy? They didn't expect the skeletons to scream when the closet door cracked open, but that's the thing about the past. It doesn't whisper when it returns, it roars. Their power is gone. The silence now isn't peace, it's fear. Their voice, once booming with false confidence, is a thin thread, barely audible, because the truth is on the table, and the truth does not stutter. It does not tremble. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1-5. You can see the sentence forming in the air. The truth doesn't beg for permission to speak. It sits like a gavel, delivering a verdict more brutal than anything you could have said yourself. They orchestrated everything, layering betrayal like bricks in a fortress. And now those walls have caved in on them. History remembers villains just as vividly as heroes. Philippe Pétain, once hailed as a savior of France in World War I, later condemned as a traitor for collaborating with the enemy in World War II. His downfall was not just in the loss of position, it was in the permanent stain on his name. The mastermind in your story is on that same path, forever marked, forever exposed. When the hands that pulled the strings begin to shake, do they ever stop trembling? Let them drown in their own silence. Chosen one, you don't need to speak. The proof speaks louder than you ever could. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Isaiah 54-17. The strings are broken, the puppeteer revealed, and the stage that once belonged to deceit is now yours. Stand tall. The world finally sees who really pulled the strings. They lit the fire. They fed it. They cheered as it spread. But now they are trapped in the ashes, coughing on the very smoke they once used to choke you. They thought they played the game well, but they were never the players. They were disposable pieces on someone else's board. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. If someone rolls a stone, it will roll back on them. Proverbs 26-27. What does a battlefield look like when the victors realize they were never holding the sword? The dust has settled, and the silence is deafening. But it's not peace, it's panic. Their eyes dart from one to another, searching for a single explanation that can make this vanish. But there's no script to follow now, no carefully rehearsed lines, no lies left sturdy enough to hide behind. The aftermath is here, and it is merciless. They clung to their self-righteousness like armor, convinced they were warriors in some noble cause. But with the curtain ripped open, they stand revealed for what they truly were, pawns in a far larger game. They followed whispers like moths circling a lantern, blind to the heat that would burn them. They promised them freedom, while they themselves are slaves of depravity. 2 Peter 2:19. Nature knows this story well. It's the locust swarm that devours everything in its path, only to collapse when the food runs out. It's the tree that grows fast in shallow soil, green for a season, but doomed when the drought comes. That is the fate of those who root themselves in lies. If the roots are poisoned, can the fruit ever save the tree? The one who rallied them never cared. The mastermind fed them deception, used them for cover, then abandoned them when the walls began to fall. It was never loyalty, it was leverage, and the most bitter truth is this: they destroyed your name for a cause that never even included them. They were soldiers in a war that was never theirs to win. Now look who stands tall, not them. Not the shadow pulling their strings, you. The one they tried to break, humiliate. Irase. The one who endured when their noise was loudest. You are the only one not scrambling, not backpedaling, not gasping for air. The Lord is my rock, my fortress and my deliverer. Psalm 18:2. What happens to a mob when the spotlight swings back and blinds them? The very crowd that once pointed fingers at you now finds every finger aimed at them. The screenshots, the receipts, the voice memos, they're no longer whispers. They're thunderclaps, rolling across the sky without pause. They're trying to cover their tracks, rewrite timelines, feign confusion, but the dominoes have already fallen, and the pattern they form is unmistakable. Every betrayal you endured now has a face, a name, Artemis Thump, and all of it connects in a web they can no longer cut apart. They thought the truth could be outrun, outnumbered, or outvoted. But truth doesn't seek permission, and it doesn't fade under pressure. It waits, patient as the tide, and then it strikes. This moment is like the climax of the 1959 film Ben-Hur, when the chariot race ends and the false victor's smile dies. Knowing the crowd has seen the truth, that's where they are now, stripped of applause, left in the dust of their own collapse. If the war is over, why do they still look like they're fighting for air? The war has ended not because you fought dirty, not because you begged for justice, but because truth, patient, precise, and devastating, finally arrived. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. And when it came, it didn't knock politely, it kicked the door off its hinges, exposed every hidden corner, and left them to sit in the rubble they created. You've already survived the fire. Now, chosen one, walk through the ashes with your head high, because when the smoke clears, the only thing left standing is you and the truth that never left your side. The tables have turned, and you are still standing. They threw dirt on your name, thinking it would bury you forever. But it became the soil that nourished your roots and anchored you deeper. Now they are buried under the weight of their own lies. Suffocating in the dust, they stirred with their own hands. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. Proverbs 26:27. You didn't need to push them in gravity, took care of that, and as they sink, they finally realize the truth they spent years running from was never chasing you, it was chasing them. What happens to the accuser when their own blueprint becomes the cage around them? It's unfolding right in front of them, and there is no exit. The collapse they swore would never arrive is here, and it is crushing them, not you. Their movements are frantic, uncoordinated, almost embarrassing to watch. In psychology, this is called cognitive dissonance, the mental whiplash that happens when reality contradicts the story they've lived in for too long. They are clumsy in their scramble, pointing fingers at one another, gaslighting the very timeline that is already printed, dated, archived. They know the evidence won't disappear, but desperation makes them grasp at illusions, even as those illusions dissolve in their hands. Every betrayal, every false accusation, every staged narrative is now documented in black and white. Their names stamped beside each one, like signatures on their own downfall. You didn't have to expose them. They exposed themselves when they underestimated how patient truth can be. Truth doesn't hurry, but it never loses. Imagine this. You're standing at the top of the pit they dug for you, looking down as they tumble into it one by one. One claws upward by blaming another, their words sliding off the walls like water on stone. Another pleads ignorance, their voice shaking. Some retreat into silence, hiding behind folded arms and lowered eyes. Others regret, but the crowd doesn't buy it. The pit was designed to trap you, but its architecture fits them perfectly. If the structure was designed to trap you, how poetic is it when the architect becomes its first prisoner? You are calm, grounded, vindicated, because truth doesn't shout. In the language of acoustics, it's like a pure frequency resonating through a cathedral. It doesn't need to be loud to shake the pillars. It shows up uninvited, clears the room without raising its voice, and leaves a silence that echoes louder than any accusation they ever made. That silence is your crown now. They never knew you. They only knew a version sculpted from whispers, painted with the jealousy of others, and handed to them like a counterfeit portrait. They didn't question it, not because they were naive, but because the lie was convenient. Siding against you made them feel bigger. Watching you stumble felt like a private victory. They fed on the image of your defeat like predators circling prey, not realizing they were already surrounded by their own traps. Let that settle in. They were not confused. They were entertained. Your downfall was their theater, their front row seat to a play they thought had only one ending. But the curtain has fallen, and the stage has changed hands. They now stand where they placed you under the harsh spotlight, exposed and trembling, while you, the one they tried to silence, remain still, saying nothing. Because the truth is speaking louder than you ever could, and the more they hear it, the more they flinch. What shakes a guilty heart more than the silence of the one they wronged? Here's the blow that shatters their composure. The same mouths that once shredded your reputation now stumble over weak defenses. I didn't know the full story. I always liked them, though I just stayed out of it. Lies, each one more hollow than the last. You can hear the tremor in their voice when they say your name now. It's not respectful. It's fear, the kind of fear that lingers, because it knows it will be called to answer one day. Fear of being seen. Fear of being remembered. Fear of being held accountable by the very person they once labeled the problem. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. And in that stillness, you've grown stronger. Stedia. Untouchable. And here is the wound they cannot heal. You no longer need their apologies. You never did. That is what keeps them awake at night. Their realization that your life has moved beyond the gravitational pull of their approval. You've outgrown the orbit they tried to trap you in, and they are left spinning in emptiness. As the architect and philosopher Le Corbusier once said, I prefer drawing to talking. Drawing is faster and leaves less room for lies. You became the living blueprint of vindication. You didn't demand justice, you became it. And now, they have to live with the image of you still rising, while they crumble beneath the weight of the story they authored with their own hands. And that image will haunt them far longer than any sentence you could speak. If the final scene belongs to the truth, will you step forward and claim it? Chosen one. The stage is yours. Stand tall. Let the silence work for you. Because when the dust settles, the only structure left standing will be you and the truth that never needed defending. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1-5. They tried to erase you, but your rise became the headline they could never bury. The truth they worked so hard to conceal now walks freely, echoing through every room they once ruled. They were there when you were stripped down to nothing, when your name was dragged through the mud, and their silence was the loudest betrayal. But now, their silence has turned into their own sentence, an unending reminder that they stood by while injustice unfolded before their eyes. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. Isaiah 54-17. For the first time, They truly see you, not the caricature they painted, not the scapegoat they clung to in their small, fearful minds, but the real you, unshaken, unbreakable, vindicated. You walked through the fire they lit, and instead of being consumed, you carried the embers with you as proof. That fire became the light guiding you forward, and have you noticed? The same people who laughed at your lowest point now can't even meet your eyes. The applause they denied you then is replaced by a hollow, choking quiet now. They thought they were breaking you, but all they did was construct the stage for your return. British wartime leader Winston Churchill once said, "If you're going through hell, keep going." You did more than keep going. You turned the battlefield into a sanctuary of truth. Imagine their shock as they realized they are now the unwilling audience to your triumph, forced to witness the very strength they once dismissed. What happens in the mind of a betrayer when the person they quietly abandoned becomes the living evidence of their own cowardice? Vindication doesn't roar. It simply stands in the middle of the storm until every false voice grows silent. They are haunted now, not by your memory, but by their own. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. Luke 8:17. You remember the long nights, the weight of walking alone, the sting of slammed doors and turned faces, the venom in whispers that spread faster than truth could travel. And here is what wounds them most deeply. You never needed their permission to rise. While they schemed in shadows, you stood steady in the light they could not dim. The day came when they scattered like insects exposed to the morning sun, their narratives dissolving in the heat of reality. Not all villains wear the mask of an enemy. Some hide behind the smile of a friend. Take the case of Marcus Larocque, a once trusted political aide who leaked false reports about his own allies to climb higher. His empire fell the day an unedited recording surfaced, his voice sealing his own fate. Like him, those who betrayed you now carry the weight of self-exposure. Their silence is no longer a shield, it's a cage, and cages have no escape. They whisper excuses to themselves at night. I wasn't part of it. I didn't want to get involved. I wasn't the worst one. But deep down, they know what Scripture has always said. So then, each of us will give an account of ourselves to God. Romans 14:12. Fear kept them still. Fear of being cast out. Fear of becoming the next target. Fear that standing with you would cost them everything. And yet, you stood without them, proving that integrity is worth more than approval. You were truth in a room full of fiction. And what happens when truth refuses to bow to the story everyone else agreed to tell? That is the image they cannot shake. It lingers like a mirror they wish they could break but cannot. And when they see you now stronger, freer, and untouchable, it is not just your victory they are confronted with. It is the undeniable record of who they were when it mattered most. The words of Psalm 37:6 come alive in your story. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. And just like the sun, you didn't need permission to rise. You simply did. Now the truth stands tall, and the shadows retreat. The time for apologies has passed. The time for redemption, for them, may be slipping away. You, chosen one, are no longer waiting for permission to take your place. This is the moment to stand, to speak, to move. Your survival was never the end game, it was the foundation. And now, the world will have to reckon with the fact that you not only survived their fire, you became the flame. Now they speak of redemption. But every fiber of your memory holds the truth. They want peace because the war has ended. But you remember when the sky was still burning, and they stood, watching, motionless. You recall the way the air felt heavy with betrayal, the way every heartbeat was like a drum in an empty valley. Even my close friend, someone I trusted, one who shared my bread, has turned against me. Psalm 41:9. And the strange part is, even in victory, you can still smell the smoke of those early battles in the corridors of your mind. When you walk into a room now, they feel it, the strange gravitational pull that truth brings. Like the sudden stillness before a storm breaks over a restless sea. The air changes, the chatter dulls, their eyes flinch like animals, sensing the shadow of an eagle above. Some fumble for words, their voices brittle, like branches about to snap. Others stand frozen, as if rooted in the soil of their own guilt. And you, how could you not remember the coldness in their faces when you needed warmth? The same people who once felt so tall now shrink into themselves when your presence enters. They want to tell you they didn't mean to stay silent. But silence is not an accident. It is a seed, and they planted it willingly. It grew into thorns that wrapped around your life. You remember who looked away when injustice dripped like poison into the room. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. James 4:17. And now, those same thorns have grown back toward them, pricking their own conscience in ways they never imagined. Nature understands this truth better than they do when a wolf sees one of its own being attacked and does nothing. The pack becomes weaker, yet they chose comfort over courage. Imagine it. The same ones who laughed when you lay in the dust are now unable to hold your gaze. They keep their heads down like wilted sunflowers at dusk, afraid of the light they once mocked. Even the ground beneath their feet seems to resist them now, as though creation itself remembers what they did. Some try to pretend nothing happened, as if their silence didn't echo like a crow's cry across the canyon of your darkest days. Others stare too long, unsure if they're allowed to offer a smile, afraid it might crack open the memory of what they did. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. And in that stillness, you became unshakable, while they remain restless, pacing the confines of their own shame. Regret wears a different voice when it's whispered through shame. Your name, the same name they once dragged through the dust, now catches in their throats, heavy like stones in a riverbed. And deep down, they know this. They didn't merely fail to protect you. They stood among the crowd, hands empty, but hearts complicit. Even if they didn't throw the stone, they didn't move to stop it from flying. And that inaction has branded them in ways no one else can see. But they feel every day. It's like in Les Miserables, when Javert realizes his lifelong pursuit was built on the wrong definition of justice. The collapse of certainty is its own prison. They, too, now live in a cell they built with their own silence. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, 2 Corinthians 5:10. And no matter how far they travel, they can't outrun the sound of the bars closing in behind them. And here is the truth that haunts them most. You no longer need them. You have risen beyond the field where they left you, bleeding. The river has carried you far downstream, and they are still standing on the same bank, watching the current take you beyond their reach. Should they speak? Should they explain? Should they apologize? Their questions are meaningless, because you have already moved on. You now walk roads they will never find, lit by a light they cannot comprehend. The betrayal cannot be softened by remorse, delivered years too late. Some wounds are not meant to be reopened, simply because the guilty are ready for closure. He will bring to light what is hidden in darkness, and will expose the motives of the heart. 1 Corinthians 4-5. You are not bitter. You are not vengeful. But you will not forget who was silent when your name was a target. And that memory, like a mountain, stands immovable between you and them. Now, the truth has built walls no apology can scale. They can want peace. They can want redemption. But the silence they chose is a monument taller than their words, a shadow they cannot outrun, and nothing will ever return to what it once was. This is your moment. Chosen one. Rise, not just as a survivor, but as the living proof that no storm, no silence, no betrayal can hold back the destiny God has written for you. And when you rise so high that even their shame cannot see over the horizon to reach you. They thought your fall was the closing act, the final page in a book they had written with their own hands, in their minds. The gavel had dropped. The verdict had been sealed. They raised their glasses as if they had just watched the demolition of a cathedral, your name reduced to rubble, your reputation swept away like ash on the wind. But in the laws of physics, destruction is never the end. It's only the conversion of one form into another. The only thing that remained crushed in that moment was their integrity. They believed dragging your name through the dirt meant burying you. In their warped psychology, if they could brand you as the villain, they could construct a narrative like an unstable bridge, impressive from afar, but doomed to collapse under the weight of truth. When you chose silence, they misread it as defeat, failing to understand that silence is often the resonance chamber of wisdom. You weren't broken, you were calibrating, like a master architect drawing blueprints in private before laying the cornerstone. While they congratulated themselves, you watched. You let them lay brick upon brick in the walls of their own prison. Every lie, another faulty beam in a structure destined to implode. They mistook your absence from the room for irrelevance. Unaware, you were quietly refining your internal frequency, tuning yourself like an instrument for the moment the truth would reverberate. No weapon forged against you will prevail. Isaiah 54-17. And in that quiet, the foundations of their false fortress began to crack. The guilt they carry now doesn't roar, it seeps, like water infiltrating stone, freezing and thawing until the rock itself begins to splinter. Their psychology has shifted. Their minds replay moments they tried to forget. And then comes the strangest scene, the loudest accuser sending you a casual message. How have you been? The text is sterile, the tone calculated. An experiment in seeing if memory can be erased by politeness. But you remember every verbal scalpel, every smirk sharpened into a blade, every standing ovation they gave to your pain. It's like the words of industrial designer Raymond Loewy, who once said, "You can't retire from being influential." They don't miss you as a person, they miss the gravitational pull of your influence. The way being near you bent the space around them. Your resurgence has created a new field, call it a spiritual electromagnetic force that they want to step back into. But access is not a matter of proximity, it's a matter of purity. And theirs is gone. And then there are the worst of them, the ringleaders, the manipulators, the blacksmiths of slander. They forged weapons in the dark, certain they would never be seen in the light. Now their voices have grown quiet, not out of repentance, but calculation. They reach out, hoping your healing means amnesia. But healing is not the deletion of memory, it's the mastery of it. The truth will set you free, John 8:32. But they have not tasted that freedom. They're still chained to the lies they built. Your silence was never surrender. It was the pause between movements in a grand symphony, the moment the conductor raises the baton before unleashing the final crescendo. In competitive strategy, they call it the quiet flank, the calculated stillness before a decisive strike. They celebrated like victors, unaware they were standing on the wrong side of history's ledger. Now they watch your rise from the sidelines, realizing they didn't just lose, they forfeited the only thing that could have redeemed them, your grace. The past is not theirs to rewrite. They tried to sculpt your identity like clay, pressing their fingerprints into every inch with gossip, fear, and projection. But clay in the hands of the wrong sculptor collapses. Clay in the hands of the Creator becomes an unshakable stone. You didn't rise to disprove them. You rose to prove the blueprint God drew for you was always flawless. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Jeremiah 29:11. And every step you take now is an echo of that divine design. They expected you to beg, to fold in on yourself like a burnt page, but instead, you stood like a cathedral untouched by fire. Your walls marked, yet unbroken. You didn't chase closure, because closure is for those who need permission to move on. You moved on because the axis of your life was never balanced on their approval. The moment they bet against you was the moment they erased themselves from your future. Now, you have evolved into something they can no longer quantify. Something that doesn't fit within the small geometry of their understanding. They no longer recognize you, and that is the point. You have outgrown the architecture of their limitations. Let them stare. Let them regret. And if they dare to speak your name now, let it echo back to them as a reminder that destiny belongs not to those who shout the loudest, but to those who stand unshaken when the shouting stops. Chosen one. If there's one truth that rises above the ruins of every lie they built, it's this: you were never theirs to define, and your destiny was never theirs to control. You have walked through fire without the smell of smoke clinging to you, and now you stand as living proof that no plot, no betrayal, no whispered slander can bury what God has ordained. Your journey is not just survival, it's a testimony, and every person hearing this right now needs to remember, the same God who sustained you in silence will display you in the light. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. If this message has stirred something in your spirit, then don't just keep it to yourself like this video. Share it so someone else can find their strength again. And comment your thoughts or your 777 as a declaration that you stand in your God-given authority. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you never miss the next word in season. To every single one of you watching, whether you've supported through super thanks or simply by showing up, I'm deeply grateful for you. Your presence here is part of this mission's heartbeat. And now, I speak a blessing over you. May your steps be unshaken, your faith be unmovable, and your light be untouchable. May you rise into the fullness of who you are, not because they believe in you, but because heaven has already written your victory. You are chosen, you are unshaken, and your story is far from over.